Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I've made good on my promise from the last video and have carved the neck for this 6-string bass project that I'm working on. If you'll remember, I told you about the blank. It contains 2 pieces of hard rock maple for the outer wings, 2 purple heart stringers, and then a maple stringer in the center. As you can probably see here, I've cut routes for the carbon fiber reinforcement rods, 2 of them, and then in the center I have a route for the truss rod. Now the carve went pretty well, but I did make a couple of mistakes that will result in me having to do a lot more handwork than I had hoped to do on this neck. But I've compiled a little montage of all the carving operations. There are maybe 8 of them in all. And I'm going to show you that first, and then I'll come back on the other side and do like a little post-mortem about sort of what went right and what went wrong. So I'll see you in a few. Okay, so as with the other videos I've done for my channel, I'm going to be shooting most of these scenes at high speed. I'll slow down maybe for a couple scenes so you can see the actual speed at which I'm running the machine. At the moment, I am doing a probing sequence to get my XYZ coordinates. And that's followed by a quick, what they call an outline pass, just so I can verify that the bit's sort of traveling where it's supposed to be. Okay, so now I've fired up the actual program, and what I'm carving now are the 2 slots for the carbon fiber reinforcement rods that are going to be installed into the neck. And then following that, I'm going to use the same bit and carve the slot for the truss rod. Now once that's finished, I'm able to move on to this next sequence, which is carving the front face of the headstock. So here's the machine running at regular speed. It's probably like 3,500 millimeters per minute, I believe. It'll speed up in a second, you'll see. And so the deal with this rough carve is I'm using a very large, kind of powerful bit to kind of get out most of the wood, to hog out most of the wood, as they say. And you'll notice that it does that in a very coarse way and leaves that very familiar stair-step pattern as it's kind of drilling down through the various layers to get me an approximation of the final shape I'm going for, which is, you know, probably like a half of a millimeter proud of what the finished product's going to be. So now I'm going to do another bit change, and I'm going to switch to a 1/4-inch ball nose bit, and I'm going to start doing the finishing pass. Now here you're seeing it's moving at regular speed. That's going to accelerate in a second. This finishing pass involves just a very kind of slow and gradual wearing away of the remaining surface wood to get my sort of final surface. And so it's taking off like probably half a millimeter per pass, and the bit is only stepping over 6% of the bit's diameter, which means it's just taking very, very small chunks. So here's the finished product. There's the kind of smooth surface of the headstock. It came out to about the equivalent of sanding it with 240 grit sandpaper. So it's not a bad finish, and it's going to require very little work kind of after I've taken it off the machine. Okay, so here's the interesting part. I've decided to take this blank and saw off a section of it, and I'm going to try to use that section to fashion a fretboard for this neck. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I just kind of like the idea of aesthetically having the fretboard match the rest of the neck. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. It might work out pretty well, and it might not. Okay, so now we are on to the this is the rough carve of the back of the neck. I've flipped the workpiece over, bolted it back down, and now it's doing a bunch of rough carve passes. And that, again, is just to kind of hog out the majority of the wood before I start doing my, my final finish passes, again, using that ball nose, 1/4-inch ball nose finishing bit. Here I've moved on to carving the back of the headstock. Again, that's at normal speed. I had to do some tricky kind of height adjustments on the z-axis because this carve starts higher than the carve you just saw, which is the back of the neck itself. So here it is sped up, as you can see, once again going down through all the layers, leaving that familiar stair-step pattern. And what I'm going to have in the end is, pretty much the rough outline of the entire headstock. And from there, I will proceed to a bunch of finishing runs. And those were interesting, and I'm going to talk about those in the post-mortem because they didn't quite go according to plan, and I'm going to pay for it on the back end with quite a bit of handwork. I chose to use, as I think I discussed this in the post-mortem, I chose to use what they call an X-parallel finishing strategy, and that means that the bit is running along the X-axis and going the length of the neck as opposed to crossing over the width. So, as promised, here is the post-mortem. What went right and what went wrong? Well, the carve was fairly effortless in terms of I wasn't pushing the machine too hard. I think I dialed in some good feeds and speeds, so I wasn't screaming through the wood or putting the machine in a position where it was going to lock up or lose its coordinates or anything like that. So overall, it went fairly well. I also am experimenting with what is going to be a new technique. I took the blank, like you saw in the video, and carved out this kind of section and then plane that. And the plan is I'm going to try to use this as a fretboard that matches the neck itself, which I don't think I've ever seen done. I've seen fretboards that are laminated fretboards, made out of multiple pieces of wood, but I don't think I've ever seen one where they take the same sort of block of wood they use for the neck shaft and make a fretboard out of it and try to mate the two. So hopefully I'll end up with a nicely aligned fretboard that blends into the rest of the neck and has some kind of visual continuity, which I think will be interesting. That remains to be seen, but it is an option. So those things went right. I think what went wrong is that my carving strategy had some flaws in it. The biggest flaw was that I chose to use, when I did the finishing passes for the back of the neck, I chose to use an X-parallel finishing strategy, which means that the bit was sort of running up and down the whole neck, smoothing it out as I went along. That kind of led to some serious irregularities in terms of tool marks and stuff that I'm going to have to kind of contend with later on. It's going to really stink to kind of file those all out and then plus preserve the very straight edge that I have for this headstock design. I ran into similar problems. I don't know if you can see it on the heel. You can see those little marks. That's where, for whatever reason, the way the bit was moving, it kind of the side of the bit dug in to the sides of the neck shaft, and so I have to contend with those as well. Interestingly, I've tried fitting this neck into an existing body that has a pocket designed for it, and it's slightly too big, so I wonder now if something went wrong with the finishing pass. Finally, I did not do a good job getting a profile carve for this neck. I ran a little, what they call a pencil program, just to sort of do the outline of the profile, and it didn't sort of dig all the way through like it was supposed to, so I ended up with a very slight, less than a millimeter thick margin on the end that you can see there. It was all the way around the neck, and I had to sort of manually remove that, and then I think in the process of doing that I compromised a bit of the straightness of these lines, not much, but more so I think I also may have compromised this surface a little bit, which needs to be dead flat, so now I have to get some abrasive sanding rolls and kind of put them out on a super flat surface and then move the thing back and forth to sand out some of these imperfections. I really would like a very tight seam, as usual, between the fingerboard and the neck shaft, and if I have any little indentations or gaps, I'm not going to get that, and I know that's going to disappoint me, even though it wouldn't really affect the functionality of the neck. So those were some of the things that went wrong, and as I mentioned, they're going to require that I do some handwork. There's another, as I think I mentioned in the last video, you don't ever know what you're going to get when you're doing a carve until you get down to the level of, the neck itself. And so I discovered, much to my chagrin, that this the neck heel has this tiny little imperfection in it. It's like a little streak or a spot or something that obviously I couldn't see when I was just dealing with the workpiece itself, the blank. And then you also might notice, it's very hard to see, but there's kind of like a little irregularity here that could be like where the grain took some weird turn, or there was something going on there that makes it inconsistent with the rest of that center maple stringer. I don't know what that's going to look like when I go to put finish on this neck. It might be more pronounced, and again, it's going to introduce kind of an aesthetic issue that won't bear on the functionality of the neck at all, but it'll just be kind of unsightly, and won't look completely professional, perhaps. I don't know. But anyways, I have a lot of work to do on this neck in terms of hand finishing still, and I'm going to get to that. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to have to make the decision of whether I keep this neck or scrap it and start over. One last thing I should mention is, again, in the same spirit of what I was just discussing, there's some brown streaking in parts of the neck. And again, it was just something I couldn't really predict until I sort of got down to the level in the blank where this grain occurs. And once again, it's not terrible. You can see it's almost symmetrical, which is kind of, I lucked out there in terms of where the brown streaks start and the direction they're heading. But at the same time, I just don't know how that's going to look when I go to finish it. Now, I could put a cap on there, maybe to match the top that I plan to use for the body. There are things that I could do aesthetically to pretty it up, but I will be having to make a decision about whether this piece is worth salvaging, or maybe I try another one and try to improve my CNC carving technique a little bit, and then set this one aside for later use. We'll see. So I'm not sure what the next video is going to be about. It could be me hand carving a bunch of stuff. Maybe it's going to be me trying to fashion this fretboard, which is always interesting, and see how it mates up with this neck shaft, and if it is kind of has the visual appeal that I hope it's going to have. Anyways, I will keep you posted and let you know. And until then, thanks for visiting my channel, and hope to talk to you soon. Bye.